Book 82, 2019 was Utopia for Realists by Rutger Bregman. So this book is talking about what utopia is to begin with. It's kind of talking about how the life that we live at the moment, or the majority of us in particularly developed countries, is the utopia that our ancestors dreamt of. We actually live now like the royalty of our ancestors. Like, we can feed ourselves, we can clothe ourselves, we can shelter ourselves, we have quite nice dwellings, like we have, like warm places to live. We have, free time, like leisure time to do what we kind of want to do. We are literally living like the royalty of the past. So the question is kind of, why do we still want to consume more? Like, when will that ever kind of stop? When will we get to the point where we kind of think to ourselves, yeah, I've got enough stuff now, I don't need any more? Like, people kind of keep consuming and keep wanting more, but what they're not recognizing is that your life is already pretty good as it is. Like, you've got quite a lot of stuff that would have made our ancestors very, very happy. So it's kind of like thinking about that. So that's kind of discussing the initial stages of the book. Then the discussion kind of turns to how detrimental the Industrial Revolution was for us as a kind of society in England. In fact, what is it talking about England? I feel like it is talking about England, but maybe it's talking about just generally everywhere when it's been an industrial revolution. But essentially, we kind of moved from agriculture to an industrial revolution. There was a lot of kind of building of factories, kind of workers living close to the factories. And what tended to kind of happen was that in order to survive and have enough money to kind of like eat and kind of like have somewhere to kind of live, people had to work 70 hours a week. So they had to work every single day. They didn't have time off for leisure and things like that, which they might have, well, they definitely did have in the kind of days of agriculture, because once you probably used to wake up early and go and harvest and I don't know, sow crops or whatever you do when you're farming. You probably did that, but then in the evening you probably had time to kind of yourself, or it would kind of come and go depending on the seasons. So you might work more when it was kind of like summery springtime, but maybe like not as much in winter. So there was a kind of more leisurely hours to spend doing what you wanted to do. Whereas with the Industrial Revolution, the people that kind of prospered from that were the people that were the employees, no, employers, whereas the employees didn't kind of really benefit from that. And I guess actually that's probably what created more of like the class system, because people didn't have like time to think about anything else. They just had to kind of like go to work and kind of try and survive. Then the kind of book moves on to kind of discussion of poverty, and how the problem with poverty is inequality. And there's kind of some discussion about how a kind of a universal credit or a basic income would help with poverty, and people wouldn't find themselves in poverty if they had that. There's a lot of kind of political ideology that people believe that people that are poor are there because of they don't want to work, or because like it's their own fault. But there's been lots and lots of studies which has found that if you actually give people opportunity to work, or you give them money to get themselves out of a poverty situation, that they do actually do that. So it's not like their own kind of fault. And there's a lot of kind of studies that Bregman talks about, which have been done, which has found that if you're always constantly worrying about money all the time, you have what's called like a scarcity mindset. So there's like psychological studies that have kind of found this. And what it does is it restricts your thinking. You don't kind of feel like you can change your situation and make it better. Like, you kind of just feel stuck within it. And this happens a lot to people. Like, we always end up like quite shut in and quite, when anyone is ever thinking of like they hate the job, they always kind of like are in that box and they think that there's nothing better out there, when the world is very big and there's lots of jobs, and you could have a different job and a better job and just go for it, you know, quit your job and find another one like I did. It works. But people kind of just have that kind of restriction in their thinking, and it stops them from achieving what they're capable of because they put these restrictions on themselves. And obviously if someone's thinking about money all the time, it restricts their thinking. It has an impact on their mental health. It has an impact on how educated they become. And so they kind of never get themselves systemically out of that poverty situation. There was kind of some studies that were cited which were about homeless people. So there's this kind of ideology that if you give homeless people money, that they'll just spend it on like things that aren't good for them, and so we shouldn't be giving them money. But they've actually done studies where they gave homeless people £3,000 and they gave them a counsellor to go with it that would help them like to, I don't know, budget or finance, like decide what they were going to do with the money basically. And it actually economically cost wherever this was done less money, because like that £3,000 was less than what it would have cost them in emergency services to try and get these people, like, because obviously if people are homeless, they get beat up, they kind of, you know, end up really unwell, they don't look after themselves because obviously if they can't, they're on the street. So it ends up costing the country more money trying to look after them than it would if they just gave them the £3,000. And a lot of the people that were given the money, not all of them obviously, but a lot of them got themselves out of that poverty situation and ended up getting themselves into a more kind of like into like a place where they could live and all that kind of stuff. So it ended up being economically a better strategy to give them the money so that they could decide what they wanted to do with it. I think a lot of the time when people are homeless, people view them as, well, I'm going to give you this money and you should be spending it on whatever. They should decide what they want to do with that money, and they've all got different kind of you know, dreams and things that they want to do and what they want to spend it on. They should be kind of given the opportunity, and most of them spent it in a positive way, in a good way that you know, actually had a benefit. Things as well, like if you give homeless people free housing, it actually ends up being more economic benefit to the place that's given the free housing, because they don't have to deal with like police trying to move them on and anything that might, you know, happen detrimentally because they're on the street. So it actually saves money if you kind of like do things like that. So it's kind of just like, you know, challenging that status quo thinking of like, you know, homelessness is something that we can't like deal with, but you actually can in just little like counterintuitive ways, like just give them some money and then they'll sort themselves out, like kind of thing. The kind of takeaway message was, if people aren't worrying about money, they'll be more productive. So if you want to stimulate the economy, if you want, you know, to get like a increases in growth and whatever, then take people's worries away from them, like, you know, give them a bit of money and then they don't have to think about where the next thing's coming from, and then they will think bigger. They won't have that scarcity mindset that kind of restricts them. There were some other kind of counterintuitive things that were spoken about, which were people like Kellogg's and Henry Ford decided to shorten the work week. So when people were working 7 days, or that it had been shortened like sort of to 6 days, because you know, with the church and things, there was the Sabbath day, so people tend not to work eventually on that day. But then, you know, obviously Henry Ford was thinking, well, if people are working all the time, then there's no one to drive my cars. So he gave people time off, so then they could, you know, drive his cars, and there'd be more demand for the cars. But what I actually found like was that people are more productive by having leisure time. It makes your workforce more productive, and you know, there's a lot of kind of mockery now of Scandinavian ideology of having like is it a 3-day work week or a 4-day work week rather than the 5, and that, you know, people are mocking it, but actually like any companies that have put it in place, that have actually trialed it, have found that their employees are more productive and they have more economic gain from that. And similarly, companies that allow their kind of workers to take time off whenever they want, they end up getting a more productive workforce. So it's something to kind of bear in mind, that with the kind of stress situation of the country at the minute, where everyone's stressed at work and people are overworked and things like that, it's damaging productivity, it's damaging, you know, economic gains. It's something to kind of think about. And so this book I thought was really quite good for that. It kind of got you thinking about things, got you thinking about things in a different kind of way. So I would probably recommend it for that. I kind of enjoyed it for that reason.